The threat that you're most concerned about is the CCP.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Not the amazing, wonderful Chinese people, Chinese culture, but we have never faced an adversary, not the Soviet Union, not Germany, Japan, never faced an adversary with rival economic might that openly talks about surpassing us technologically, that is building ships at a rate of 3 to 5 to 1. You could fit every shipyard in the United States inside China's one largest shipyard. We have 1 to 2% of shipbuilding.
Yeah,
They're at
China's
over
at
50%,
50%,
and the rest is South Korea and Japan, right? That is increasingly dominating, not dominating, but challenging us in space, that intends to put a station on the moon, the ultimate high ground, by the end of this decade. Thank God for Jared Isaacman and the renewed push. I touched Cape Canaveral in my old congressional district. And, in 2018, the Chinese launched more into space than us and the rest of the world combined. By last year, SpaceX was launching more than the rest of the world combined. That's American ingenuity, right? Yeah. At its best. So no other adversary has ever had the ability to challenge us in all of those domains. Add cyber to that, and has such an aggressive influence operation here at home, in academia, through Confucius Institutes. Many of these Chinese students are wonderful young people, but if their family's threatened at home, they don't have a lot of choice, and it's a challenge unlike any we've ever faced. Now, ultimately, I'm convinced we will prevail. It's a real competition.
How close is it?
Ultimately, we will prevail. We always have.
What's the biggest thing in the way?
I'll tell you, well, right now, and a number of us, and the president is laser focused on this, supply chain, supply chain, supply chain. If there was any lesson from COVID, was that seemingly inexpensive things that cost pennies, like mask, gowns, and gloves, can become a national security risk. I'll never forget in 2019, the Pentagon, I was on the relevant committee in the Armed Services Committee, comes to us kind of in a panic about ammunition, the cost of ammunition, and they need more money, and we're all shooters. We know how expensive a bullet is these days, and need more money, need more this. We dug into it, and it turns out the biggest missing piece was an element called antimony. There was formerly 5 mines in Idaho and Utah. They'd all been shut down by overregulation, environmental regulation. The investors and the owners had walked away. 3 countries in the world that mine and refine antimony: Tajikistan, Russia, China. Go back to the Pentagon, like, this is a crisis. What are you going to do about it? This was actually, I think by this time it was 2021, 2022. And they said, oh, no, well, we're demarching, meaning sending a strongly worded letter on, why these countries have withheld shipments from us. You kidding me? So, like-minded group, mainly veterans, we forced the Pentagon to create a stockpile, at least, so we have some emergency supply until what we see now with Secretary Bergrum and Wright and the president and others are revitalizing our mining and refining industry. And if it can't happen here fast enough, at least it's happened with allied countries, seabed and other places, right? So supply chains across the board, we have to be self-sufficient. I mean, that, the arsenal of democracy has to be there and present. It's what President Trump so uniquely realizes. The big stick isn't our military. The big stick is the strength of our economy and our supply chains and our resilience. And, he's taken all kinds of measures to revitalize that. And I have to, my small piece of this is blocking and tackling in these international organizations.
What do you think your biggest challenge is going to be as ambassador to the UN as far as the reform goes?
Well, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity, is we'll have a new Secretary General. So kind of, the administrative head of it all elected this year. Again, China, Russia, Europeans, we all have a veto. So it has to be somebody that we come to a consensus on. But this has to be somebody that is reform-minded. We have to save this institution from itself. It's just sinking under its own bureaucratic weight. And it should be the Secretary General. It should be the UN that's solving things like Cambodia, Thailand, and India, Pakistan, and Azerbaijan, Armenia. They should be in there. Fine. President Trump has stepped in as the peace president. I think he'll get the Nobel Peace Prize for it. I'm now getting the UN in a supporting role, but with the next Secretary General, they should be in a leading role. Again, back to basics, not trying to solve all this other woke nonsense.
Yeah. Well, Mike, is there anything we didn't cover that you want to cover?
I would be remiss if I didn't just very publicly thank my amazing wife. She is herself a combat veteran, both Afghanistan and Iraq, a family of immigrants. She was also established the State Department's hostage negotiation office. She was one of the first hostage envoys and was President Trump's Homeland Advisor in his first term. So, man, as husbands, we try, but we never win an argument. I really never, ever win an argument. And oh, by the way, she's drop dead gorgeous. So, I say that because my wife's amazing and my family's amazing. But I say that as a Christian. But I also say that as a veteran in the sense that, it's the families that bear the burden of service. We're out there being commandos or diplomats or whatever, serving this amazing countries in ways that are incredible. The families, we don't come home. We come home missing limbs, or we come home not right up here anymore, right? So I just have, for both the Gold Star community and all the families out there, whether you're in the intelligence community, diplomatic service, military, whatever, just a deep, deep appreciation. And one last thing, we don't want to go too long. I think my most amazing moment with President Trump, and I talked about this in my speech at the Republican National Convention, was with the 13 Gold Star families of Abbey Gate. These families it's bad enough the loss and how the loss happened, but they literally couldn't get an audience with the previous commander-in-chief, with Biden. They were so distraught. And they come to us in Congress, and this is what I love about him. I said, let me give him a call. Call him. He's Michael, get him up here. Tonight. And so we get him up to Bedminster. The scheduler calls me and, a little bit distraught and says, all right, we had a lot going on. We can carve out an hour. He ended up spending the entire night with him. He shook every one of them's hand, heard the stories, talked about their loved ones, then invites them up to dinner. Sean, by the end of the night, he had one of the couples who was having a really hard time with it all up dancing. The moms were laughing.
That's awesome.
A couple of the moms came up to me and Julia, my wife, afterwards and said, this is the best thing that has happened to me since I lost my son. So I just say that in the sense that's a side no one ever sees that I, deeply appreciate. And I think your viewers would appreciate too.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, man.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.